Good afternoon in New York. Good morning in California. Good evening in Armenia, Germany, and Europe. Good very early morning in New Zealand. And welcome whatever time of day or night for all who are joining us from all corners of the world. I'm Yael Danieli, founder and executive director of the International Center for Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma, ICMGLT for short. Thank you for joining our webinar on multi-generational legacies of the Turkish genocide of the Armenian people after the displacement of the Armenians from Artsakh or Nagorno-Karabakh. This International Center for Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma webinar is held on the 109th anniversary of the Turkish genocide of the Armenian people during our year of the dissolution on 1 January 2024 of the internationally not recognized Republic of Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, following Azerbaijan unprovoked attack of Artsakh in 2020 and the consequent years of provocations, which ended by ethnically cleansing the indigenous Armenian population from Artsakh and potentially the end of millennia of Armenian presence in the region. The International Multidisciplinary Panel of Armenian descendants of the Turkish genocides will reflect on both its multi-generational legacies and on their own engagement with an impact of the Artsakh conflict and its retraumatizing ending. Your moderator, I am a clinical psychologist, traumatologist, and psychohistorian. I devoted much of my career to studying, treating, writing about, and preventing lifelong and multi-generational impacts of massive trauma, to ensuring victims' rights, to rights of future generations, and to reparative justice. I conceive of reparative justice as not only focusing on the outcome of justice, but equally on ensuring justice is not only focusing, but equally on ensuring that the justice process itself is of a reparative relationship between the justice system and the victims, and of history as it is lived now, not only as a set of dates and events, but as it is shaping our identities and guiding our choices today. Our first speaker of this august panel is Peter Barlawanian, a producer-director with over 30 years of experience in almost every aspect of the entertainment industry. Peter is a grandchild of orphans of the Armenian genocide and an active force in protecting the Armenian culture through music, art, and film. Peter is also a member of ICMGLT Advisory Council and chair of the ICMGLT Working Group on Armenia. This webinar will not have happened without his help. Our second speaker is Anna Kachikian, the esteemed founder of the Armenian Report. Anna has established herself as a prominent figure in television and journalism on various influential platforms for nearly 20 years and made significant impact as one of the original cast members of TMZ on TV. Her previous illustrious career began at CNBC Business News, transitioned to the national news anchor with NBC News Channel, to making a remarkable mark at KABC Local News. Third is Dr. Gurgen Petrosyan. Dr. Gurgen Petrosyan holds the position of Senior Officer for International Criminal Law at the International Nuremberg Principal Academy. He teaches international law and international criminal law at Erlangen, Nuremberg, Eichstätt, Ingolstadt, and at Yerevan State Universities. Additionally, he is the chair of the German Armenian Lawyers Association. Last but not least is Dr. Maria Armoudian, who is joining us at 5 in the morning, New Zealand. Award-winning author, senior lecturer, and co-director of the Center for Climate, Biodiversity, and Society at the University of Auckland, New Zealand. Maria is producer, host, and founder, of the Scholar Circle radio program. She has published widely on human rights, environmental politics, communication, and good governance in academic journals and popular press. Previously, she was commissioner in the city of Los Angeles and worked in California's state legislature. Maria is also a songwriter and musician. We have 2 hours for the webinar. Each of our panelists will speak for about 10 to 12 minutes. Following an interchange among us, I will open the floor to questions or brief comments from the virtual audience. We will then conclude with last words. Please use the chat function, and we will do our best to respond to as many as we can. Of course, feel free to direct your questions to a particular panelist or to the full panel. I now have the pleasure to offer the screen to Peter. Peter, the floor or the screen is yours.
Thank you. Oh, that looks like me, of course, but thank you, Professor and Dr. Danieli. I am very happy to be part of this panel, and it's a very important part of our struggle, the Armenian struggle that's been going on for such a long time. We've been basically dealing with the genocide since our grandparents' survival of the genocide and the multi-generational trauma that is connected to the suffering that we have basically handled on our shoulders and carried. I was born in North America. My father was born in Beirut, Lebanon, but my grandfather was born in Artsakh, which is a town in eastern Turkey presently that was forced at the time of 1915 at the genocide, and he managed to survive at the age of 6 years old. So the journey of his life brought me to North America. And even though I've personally never encountered a genocide, presently with the people in Armenia and obviously the people in Artsakh and all the work that we have done over the past few years, the genocide is alive. It's happening in present time, in today's time. And we've been dealing with the trauma and the effect of that trauma from the original genocide, which I feel and documented that has never really ended. And that is the issue that we're trying to figure out, how we can stop it and how we can move on from this chapter. But it seems that there are players in the world that want to eliminate all of that is Armenian from their lands, from history books, from churches being torn down, cemeteries being pillaged. And this part of it, which we deal with, as I'm a third generation right now, the fact that I'm dealing with still a genocide that's ongoing to the people of that happened in Artsakh, literally starting with the war in 2020, where it was an unprovoked attack from Azerbaijan, and they basically took on 44 days of an assault. The Armenians took on an assault, tried to protect themselves, lost over 5,000 people, and at the same time, half of the lands that they were living on. And then afterwards, the whole process of trying to survive, and the people that survived through it again, 2.5 years of being tortured practically, mind games, being behind a blockade for 9 months, being starved. All of these things that are happening on real time in front of our watch, in front of, television, social media, people that are all around the world, because Armenians are all around the world. I mean, this is something that people haven't figured out, how we're so scattered. We're basically, Maria is living in New Zealand, Gurgen is living in Germany. I mean, there's Armenians all over Europe. And this is because of the fact that when the genocide happened, the families or the people who were displaced, and not only displaced, whoever were able to survive through the genocide were put into the desert and then found refuge in different countries, including in the Middle East, in Lebanon, which my grandfather ended up finding refuge in an orphanage, where he met my grandmother in an orphanage, and thus, started a new life after. This is the story of an Armenian, and that's the thing that we carry on generations and generations. And it's interesting because I've had friends tell me about why is it that you're still marching and protesting something that's happened over 100 years ago? And the simple answer is because we haven't been able to stop it. We haven't been able to change the pattern of what's happened to the Armenians till today. And proof is the Artsakh war in 2020, even the 2016, the 4-day war that they tried to attack. And then afterwards, the genocide, because it was a genocide to the people of Artsakh of being behind a blockade. And as this was happening, we were filming, my group, my team, my filmmaker from Artsakh, which her name is Mariam Abedisyan. I've been working with her on the project since the war had stopped, and we had filmed in all of Artsakh, in every village that you can imagine. Now that that is obviously out of our hands, we had documented, interviewed people, their struggles, their lives, just to spread awareness, because people don't have any idea of the story, and the media never covered it, which was a terrible, lack of function when it comes down to just spreading awareness. The social media, there's extreme propaganda created against the Armenians that works against them. The wheel of propaganda from the Turks and the Azeris is a very powerful wheel, and they spend a ton of money. But Armenians are still fighting for truth and justice, and they're still fighting for peace. And that is a strange way of looking at it, but we have to fight for peace. And this is something that unites Armenians all around the world. This is something where we find that we have something in common, which is our survival and our identity, and we will fight for it till the day comes that they will stop and they will accept what they've done. The people that have perpetrated these acts in 1915 are long gone, but their ancestors are protecting this disgusting history, putting it under the rug, and not opening that chapter properly so that we can all find some kind of an end to this and heal properly. This never-ending genocide, this never-ending attempt to eliminate Armenians from this world is ongoing, and that's why Armenians of today, even a 15-year-old an adolescent that's grown up in Hollywood, in LA, or in Paris, still carries this burden, this heavy, there's a connection to the genocide and the ancestors because it was never accepted. And the denial is the continual of this genocide. The Turkish denial is ongoing. It's ongoing, so powerful that now the propaganda has led to it being more about Armenians killing Turks in 1915, Armenians committing genocide. So they've doubled down in the propaganda, and they've worked really hard to try to sell this idea that Armenians are the bad people and Armenians were the ones that were rebelling in the Ottoman times. And all of these are just false propagandas that have been now all over social media. And social media can be used for wonderful things, and it could be used for very terrible things. And this is a terrible thing when you're disseminating information that is completely false, but you're basically reaching people that you would never reach before, that never had an idea of what the story is about, and then filling their heads with false propaganda. Azerbaijan is a perfect example. There's a full country of a population of almost 10 million people, and the majority of the population see Armenians as demons. They see Armenians as subhuman. And this is not a healthy environment to be. Armenia and Azerbaijan share a border together. I mean, they're going to be sharing a border together for a very long time. This is something that we have to find a path to peace. Now, the conflict also lies within Armenians, because Armenians have been scattered all over the world. Everybody has a way and attempt of trying to fix the problem or this issue, and everybody's way is not the same, and all of us have dealt with different kind of adversaries. So we still struggle within ourselves trying to find a way of dealing with these issues, trying to find a common language. The one that's always was uniting Armenians all over the world, or when I was born in Canada, we didn't have Armenia. It was part of the Soviet Union. So the two things that I was taught when I was a child was we need to have an independent country. So the aim was always about trying to have an independent country so that we can be identified, properly. Growing up, it wasn't easy to be an Armenian, even in Canada, because to explain to people who an Armenian is, what an Armenian is, I had to go through the whole path of history, which brought us to the genocide, which always made the conversation, sad or upsetting. But that this is the truth, and we all have to carry this with us, almost like our tail. It comes with us everywhere we go. So this is the issues that we've been dealing with on a regular basis, and we still deal with it today. And unfortunately, I'm over 50 years old, and our issues have gotten even worse now in our generation. I never thought that we would see another war and that we would see another one, but we saw a huge one in 1991 when Armenia declared independence, and Artsakh had declared independence, and they wanted to be by themselves, or at least be attached to Armenia and get out of the Soviet Azeri state, which Azerbaijan could have easily, the government then could have easily said, yes, you're 98% Armenian. Sure, that's the will of the people. We'll let you go. And we're thriving to be independent. We're thriving to be a democratic country, because that was the whole goal, to get away from the Soviet regime, is to be independent and to be democratic. But yet what happened? They decided they weren't going to accept it, and they basically started a war that lasted 3 years, and that had over 100,000 people die from both sides, and people being displaced, and people from both sides, people being basically picked on from one end to the other. Pogroms were committed in Azerbaijan, in Baku and Sumgait. I mean, there was massacres. People act very barbaric when it comes down to war. Obviously, we see it happening now in Gaza. We see it happening in Ukraine. These are things that are happening around the world. When there's war, it's almost like we're not human anymore. We believe that we can do anything, and it's in our right to do it. And as humans, and I believe this is the weakness of humans, they fall into this trap of killing and being barbaric. And I feel that all these centuries as human beings, we have evolved We don't need war to communicate and to get what we need. We need to be able to talk. We need to be able to communicate with each other. We need to be able to tell stories to each other so that we can learn from it. We have to protect history so we can not relive it again in a cycle. And I feel like this is where we're at now. We're caught in this pattern where, we fight hard to break out of, but then we somehow manage to fall into it. And then the division that's created from a genocide, the division that even the Armenians have dealt with, scattered all over the world, unifying them together, bringing Armenians together, has been an issue, because genocide does that, makes you feel weak, and you're under attack at all times. And even a generation can go by. And my father, when he was growing up in Lebanon, all he was programmed was that, the Turks killed his grandparents, and basically, he couldn't trust them. And this was integrated into the way he was brought up, which was a self-protection mechanism. And that was also put into me another generation afterwards, which eventually I had to decide on my own that, oh, well, it's not all Turks that are bad people. Obviously there's a population of Turkish people that want this to be behind them as well. But unfortunately, the powers that control the populations feed the masses propaganda, and this cycle continues and it comes back again. And it's a sad situation, but for the last 4 or 5 years since the 2020 war and before, my goal has been to document, to spread awareness through what I do, and to talk about it to people, to share these stories, and to see if we can find some kind of final resolution to this ongoing feud or ongoing attack on the Armenians around the world. And it's not just people dying, it's the identity, it's the history, erasing in social media. It's so easy digital world, it's so easy to erase history. It's so easy to rewrite it. And now all of a sudden, nobody is telling the truth. Everybody, you can doubt everything that you hear. So now the truth ends up getting lost in everything that you have in front of you. And now there's 10 falses and one truth. And now people don't know what to believe. So it's almost playing the odds. There's more false out there than there is truth. And that's what's becoming the biggest problem. It's figuring out who to trust, who's got the information. And even when the war was going on, there was information being brought out at the time in the 2020 war from the Armenian side, and the information we trusted, obviously, but it wasn't always the truth, even from the Armenian side, because this is the game that people end up playing in power. And sadly, and the populations and the masses are the ones that are suffering the most from it.
Thank you so much, Peter, for giving us the arc of your own history and of Armenian history. Rabbi Oshai, please put on the chat the recording of our webinar 2 years ago, and Peter and the link to Peter's film then. So those of you in the audience who didn't have the chance to see it, please do. It's extremely moving and extremely informative. Thank you. I see that it's already on the chat. Okay, Peter, wonderful. Thank you. And Peter and all panelists, please, whatever you want to put in the chat, anything that you can help inform people, because we have in the audience people from over 12 countries, not all of whom are Armenians. So they want to learn. Everybody wants to learn. Everybody wants to know who is with us. So put in the chat any information to enrich this already very rich introduction. Thank you. And Anna, here you are, an information seeker and giver. Please, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, I appreciate it. So my story is actually a little different from Peter's in the sense that I grew up, I was born and raised in Yerevan, Armenia. However, I was born during the Soviet time when Armenia was part of the Soviet Union. So I did not know about the Armenian genocide because it was not taught in our schools, and it was not talked about in our homes. So when I grew up and I became a journalist, and looking back in hindsight, I remember when I found out about it, I was very upset. I was upset that I was misinformed. I was upset that I was robbed of my own history, that my history was hidden. And there's a feeling that there was that trauma when I found out about it. I was upset, I was frustrated, and it makes sense now that I chose the decision to become a journalist, right? That's the only career I've had my whole life, to make sure that these stories are told. To me, these stories are so important to be told, to be shared, and on repeat because of the internet now. It's not print anymore, it's digital. So the more we feed the internet, the more, access people will have to this information down the line. And to have witnessed what happened to the Armenians of Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, firsthand, while I had already founded the Armenian Report, as an Armenian, I remember watching what was happening during 2020 and thinking, I can't believe this is happening to us again. Because it wasn't just a trauma, it was a copy paste of what we were told by our grandparents and great grandparents, the books we read, what the historians have confirmed to the world. It was a copy paste of what had happened. And I kind of want to speak to the non-Armenians who are listening, and just to give more of the current historical background, was that there was an unprovoked war in 2020, right? And thousands of people died, Armenians. And then in 2023, there was the 9-month blockade, right, Peter? It was yes, no, it was ended in September, 9 months. Yes, it was in 2023. For 9 months, these people were starved, and literally starved, because I want to bring it back to current day. Right now, there is the conflict that's happening in Tavush province, right, where these more Armenian lands are being surrendered to Azerbaijan, and the people are protesting. So they're out on the streets all night for 36, 48 hours. And our reporter was there, and one of the questions I asked was, what did you guys eat? And she was also there in September 26, 2023, when there was a forced displacement, the mass exodus of Armenians coming in from Artsakh. So she experienced both. And I asked the question, I said, what did you guys eat? She said, there was food. Everyone took their portion. She said, it wasn't like September 2023. And I said, what was the difference? She's like, well, when people were coming in from Artsakh, they hadn't had food in 9 months. So everyone was just like food, which to me validated the extent of this blockade, like the true representation of, like, okay, you kept reading about it, you kept writing about it, that there's a blockade, there's no food, it's famine. And she, to me, was, validated that when there is food, people, Armenians, are not scrambling and taking it all, and that they're sharing, and it's a community. Whereas when the Artsakh mass exodus happened, it was evident that these people were being starved to death for 9 months. And after that, we have for the forced displacement, and now there's 120,000 civilians who are out of a home. I get messages on the Armenian report constantly saying, we need a job, can you take us in, we don't have a place to stay. Like, it's complete trauma and blow to all Armenians to witness what is happening once again. And today is April 24th, Armenian Genocide Day, and President Erdogan once again just gaslighting the people. And this is what he says. Okay, he says that we should abandon the baseless memories that we have. And I want to read the full quote, and I also want to send the link because this isn't the full quote that I'm reading, but he says, it's time for Armenians to abandon baseless memories and better to act on the realities of the present time. Now, Pashinyan understands this. It's time to create new roadmaps on a realistic basis. I hope that Armenia will get rid of the darkness into which it was dragged by the Armenian diaspora, that's me, and will choose the path of new undertakings for the sake of a bright future, threatening that if you want to move forward, you will, for a brighter future, you will abandon this baseless memories that you guys have. Just another blow. Instead of, when Armenians are so emotionally charged on this day, instead of being just shut up, at least just don't say anything. But no, he went ahead and gaslit Armenians, and it's a never-ending cycle of disrespect and trying to erase our history, like Peter said. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. This is so important because this denial and the silence, whether it's politically motivated silence or even psychological attempt to protect silence. I've written a great deal of this conspiracy of silence after genocide and Holocaust. I'm, of course, always reminded that while there's still denial today, Hitler actually took the denial as license to commit the Holocaust of the Jewish people, quite openly. He took that as license. So history is not quite agreeing with even historians who are in the party line don't quite agree. But and of course the issue that Peter started and you go with, the issue of the notion of the correct information in the era of non-information. But you see, when you're listening to you carefully, there was always denial, you see. There was always misinformation. So social media just makes it worse now.
The social media has created a complete chaos for information, unfortunately. But I also think that it has made people better consume. It has taught people how to consume information, how to go through the noise. So we can thank that, because before they were just like, here's a newspaper that I received, this is what I read, this is what I'm told, and period, the end. Whereas now with social media, people are learning and have learned to do better with where they get their information, how they consume their information, which is, I try to look at the pros and cons of everything, because it's inevitable. There's no way, we're evolving, we're changing, and this is the world we live in. So there's pros and cons. So I try to focus on the pros, because and try to get people to realize that how to consume news, how to figure out where does this publication stand, who is it funded by, these are really important things that people need to look into.
Absolutely. And all of you are doing sacred work in my book. So,
Thank you.
so I'm humbled and embracing.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you.
And next, next we will hear the legal point of view, which is very hot. Everything about this is so intensely important. Gorgon, please, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Yael. It's my honor to be here with you and also with my distinguished colleagues and my country people here in this panel. Indeed, what we are as Armenians are suffering today and day by day is becoming worse and worse. The whole situation around the situation in Artsakh, people from Artsakh, from Armenia, it's really becoming very, very intense, everything. And it reminds me actually the whole process where exactly it started with the Genocide Convention. You know, Raphael Lemkin, who is the founder of the Genocide Convention, he was really interested in one of the processes being held here in Germany, in Berlin in 1921, referring to the Soromon-Tellerian trial. And he was a student at that time at Lvov University, law student at Lvov University. And he was very interested why exactly the German authorities are trying a man for a murder of one person when the so-called victim was never tried for killing millions of people. And with this question, he went to his professor, Stanislav Starzhinsky, to ask exactly the same question, how it interrelates to the international law. And the professor of that time, we need to go back into the first after the First World War ideology of international law, or the perception of about the international law. And the professor brought an example to Raphael Lemkin, giving him an example of a person who owns chicken. He said, imagine you own chickens and it's your business. So nobody needs to intervene into your relationship with your business. And if one day you decide to kill those chickens, so nobody should intervene in that, because otherwise it would be a trespass. So this is something which unfortunately is, again, in international law, we see it especially today, that again, this topic is becoming very, very problematic, because I feel that nobody cares what exactly happens with Armenians now on international level. And I echo everything what Peter and Anna already said about these problems with Artsakh, with our suffering. It's really becoming very, very problematic that international community is not really interested in the topic, because it's not, they have already so many problems, and this issue with Armenian cause, Armenians, is not becoming so much relevant. You cannot see really in the media, neither in Germany nor internationally, that this topic is somehow highlighted, because it's so urgent. What happened to Artsakh Armenians is exactly what Peter mentioned. It's a continuation of genocide. And negationism, as a denial of genocide, is actually the last stage of the genocide. But sometimes I'm philosophically a little bit not sure. Are we already in the third stage, or we are still in the second stage, where the physical destruction is still being done? You know, it was already mentioned about social media, or the involvement or the role of the social media in the news. I want to bring an example, and also Peter mentioned very correctly about the Azerbaijanis' hate policy against the Armenians. And I believe that this started somehow in 2006 with the case of Ramil Safarov being murdering Gurgen Markaryan in Budapest, and then being tried for murder and being convicted for murder, and then later being extradited to Azerbaijan, and being directly the same day of his extradition, He was released and glorified as a hero for beheading an Armenian. And that remembers me in 2016, the first social media videos that were spread in different channels of a beheading of Armenian soldiers, and glorifying an acts. Because if you glorify a murderer, a perpetrator for beheading, so the whole population thinks that this is something true, and they need to follow the same fate in order to receive a recognition from their president and from the society. And in 2016, it started. And then in 2020, that was a massive attack on Armenians. And this is what the genocide comes again into the play, the terminology of genocide. Those Armenians who were victims of these beheadings and these videos that were taken of killing the Armenians, beheading the Armenians, and then spreading in different channels, in TikTok, in Instagram and stuff. Those victims were not selected because of their personalities, because they were good or bad, because they were in the battlefield. They were selected because they were Armenians, because they belonged to Armenian ethnicity. And this is what is very important, that even the spreading those videos in different channels, it has an intent of giving a message to everyone who watched that video, that in case he lands on the battlefield, or if he lands under the hand of the Azerbaijani soldiers, that would be the same that happened. That would be the same that happened in that video. You know, after the 2020 war parade was initiated in Baku, and this trophy park that was opened in Baku, only the idea of making some puppets and showing the society, the Armenians with disregarded, picturing the Armenians in a very bad conditions with so-called Armenian noses, or I don't know, torturing the Armenian puppets, is already so, I'm sorry for using that, but it's so sick to do it publicly and show as a glorification for the society. And that remembers me already the Nuremberg processes. As you know, as you mentioned correctly, I'm coming from the Nuremberg, where exactly the Nuremberg trials were held. And one of the judgments here was referring about the hatred against the Jews. Julius Streicher, who was the founder of the newspaper, so-called newspaper, the Stürmer, the International Military Tribunal here in Nuremberg found that his instigation and his hate speech that he spread was considered as a poison in the German society. The German society was poisoned by this ideology, or seeing these pictures in the newspaper where Jews were pictured in a very, with big noses and in different ways, in order to instigate this hate toward the Jews. And this is again, the history repeats. And also Peter mentioned also a very interesting point, that as soon as the war is coming, the people are becoming barbarian. In 21st century, already seeing so many things and so many genocides all around the world, and always saying never again, never again, never again. So it is actually the time to stop it, just to take a physical steps to stop all the genocide that is happening. Anna also mentioned something that I also planned to say about the Erdogan's speech, I think yesterday, and these baseless memories. This is again so sick to see from the perpetrator successor, to hear this kind of wording towards the Armenians, who are already being suffered so many times, and this is becoming more and more problematic. And it's really the time that international community just stops that. I cannot, sometimes I'm so disappointed that international community doesn't really take any step to stop this, everything that is happening in Armenia. I have so many things to say, but I will stop maybe here, and they will continue at the other stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gauguin, you have plenty of questions from the audience to speak more to. Yes, thank you very much. And now our heroic friend, who is so dedicated that she woke up before 5 in the morning to join us. Maria, please.
I want to start first by just thanking you, Yael, for this opportunity to talk about such an important matter that is being neglected in most forums. So thank you for your interest and thank you for your care. I want to also thank Peter Balawanyan, my longtime dear friend, and, you know, I feel like partner in this effort, even across oceans and continents, in, you know, bringing the truth to the rest of the world. And Anna and Gurgen, thank you both so much. I'm just so moved by who you both are and the work that you're doing. It's, you know, what would we be doing without you? Thank you. I guess I'll start by saying my family history is a little like Peter's, in that both of my grandparents were genocide survivors, both of my grandfathers, and, you know, one lost 8 of 9 of his siblings in the genocide, and the other lost 2. And their stories are pretty remarkable. I won't get into them, but my father's father, I'll just mention that, you know, they were integrated into a Turkish town. And when the government decree came to deport into the desert and annihilate my grandfather and his family, the Turks in the town didn't want to do it, and they actually argued against the Turkish government and said, why? You know, they're not militants, they're integrated, they're part of our community, and they're willing to take, you know, Turkish names and fully integrate. But the government would hear none of that, and so they came for them too. There are lots of little stories along the way that I think are really important and really point the picture that Peter was trying to articulate, in that we are all people, and people are not all bad because of their ethnicity or all good because of their ethnicity. There is nothing in that, in being a particular ethnicity, that makes you one way or another. That is a stereotype that gets, you know, placed on people. And genocides happen because of genocidal leaders who encourage, you know, through media as one example, which is one of the areas that I study, to persuade people that they are evil with this stereotype, or an enemy because of this stereotype. If it weren't for some of the really good Turkish people, I would not be here today, because they helped my grandfather to survive in little ways. So I just wanted to start with that, and then say that you can probably tell from my accent that I am not born in New Zealand, that I came here a decade ago from the United States to teach at the University of Auckland. When I arrived here, I was sort of, having come from Los Angeles to New Zealand, I was shocked at how little was known about Armenians or the Armenian genocide. And I later became even more shocked to find out that they have a dedicated monument, more than one actually, to Kemal Atatürk in New Zealand. And to find out that Australia also had a dedicated monument to Kemal Atatürk. And so I started to look into the history here in New Zealand related to the Armenian genocide. And it was sort of shocking to me to see that.
Maria, would you explain to those who don't know the history who Kemal Atatürk was?
So, I mean, Kemal Ataturk was an officer in the Turkish army during the genocide, and I don't want to spend too much time on that, but
No,
after,
just to inform people so that
yeah,
so they
so,
understand the meaning of your
right,
astonishment to find him there rather than
yeah,
more
absolutely.
Armenians, right?
Well, I was going to say that after the genocide was when his role is the most important, which I mean, some historians don't even, you can't really say after the genocide because it is still going on. Some historians say it was a 30-year genocide because it started long before 1915 in this gradual annihilation of Armenians, but also Assyrians and Greeks. So it was a 30-year genocide in their view because of all Christian non-Turks, right, to annihilate them all. You know, there's some debate in historic circles about whether it was a 30-year genocide, whether it started in 1915. But after that period ended, and there was the Treaty of Sèvres, which was going to give Armenia a homeland, that was a completely different situation. That was part of what Turkey is now. Like that Western Armenia was going to be Armenia proper, their own democratic country. Kemal Ataturk was the one who started to fight against the Treaty of Sèvres. He attacked the Armenians, he attacked the Greeks. In some newspapers, it says he was worse than the genocidaire, the genocide leaders, during the 1915 genocide, in what he and his forces did in order to take all of that area and to try to finish the job of annihilating the Armenians. So that's just as much as I can say. Now, I would like to also just add that Hitler learned from Ataturk, and he became a model for how you can build a kind of monolithic, you know, nationalism that then could, you know, become this way of building a country that was devoid of the people you don't want. Okay, so I didn't mean to talk about all that. I wasn't even prepared for that, but it's okay. I can. So, but it's important.
That explains to those who don't know your astonishment with coming to New Zealand and discovering that he's the commemorated one.
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked. I just should have been more prepared for it. Yeah, so then I guess, so when I looked into the history of New Zealand and the Armenian genocide, what I found was that before, during, and after, there were thousands of articles talking about the genocide during that were published at that time when it was happening. And the word genocide hadn't been coined yet because of Raphael Lemkin hadn't coined that term yet, but they used the synonyms in these articles like extermination, Holocaust, elimination,
Massacre.
and if you look throughout these articles, you can see that New Zealand was acknowledging then of an unfolding genocide that was occurring. And then after Kemal Ataturk came in, they called him, you know, worse than the genocidaire. So I'm looking at this history and I'm thinking, God, what is this strange juxtaposition of, you know, while the genocide is happening, to acknowledge it and to try to aid. There was considerable aid that came out of New Zealand and Australia for the Armenians at the time. And then you fast forward to today, and there's no memory, no acknowledgement, and yet honoring and partnering with Turkey, honoring Mustafa Kemal. I don't even, sometimes people should remember his name as well in this way. And so as I studied the history, I realized that what happened was this thing that Anna was talking about, and Peter talked about, and Gurgen talked about, which is a propaganda campaign to reframe what happened during World War I, because New Zealand and Australia had sent soldiers into Gallipoli. They were called Anzac soldiers, and for Australia and New Zealand. And they had sent them today is Anzac Day, which is connected to the Armenian genocide, because that was the day when the Turks realized that the Anzac soldiers were coming, that they were going to annihilate every Armenian that they could. So there's this connection between Anzac Day and the Armenian genocide. But while that is historically connected, the Turks have now reframed that as enemies, now friends, and had come with the proposal of trade at a time when New Zealand needed trade. They came with this proposal of, let's create this narrative of, the Turks and the New Zealand soldiers were kind to each other, and they were friendly, and they took care of each other. And there were incidents of that, because as I said, you can't stereotype an entire people. So that narrative no longer has room for an Armenian genocide. And that has enabled the pushing away of the truth of the Armenian genocide, of what actually happened, and of the heroic acts that New Zealanders had at the time of helping Armenians. Now, I'd like to just also talk a little bit about Artsakh, because the other thing that happened when I got here is that I started to put on some events here so that people would understand and learn about the Armenian history. And one of the people that decided to take this issue up was my master's student, Olivia Guyotto. And she was an art history student who then decided to do a master's degree in political science and international relations. So she combined these by studying the cultural heritage of Armenians, both in historic Armenia, which is now Turkey, and in Artsakh, which has now been taken by Azerbaijan, and to look at this cultural heritage through the lens of, first of all, how it's being expressed in the media, in Azerbaijan's media and Armenia's media. She looked at both. And then she also looked at the civil society groups that are trying to protect the memory and this heritage of Armenians within what is now Turkey itself. And so in comparing the framing and the narrative of Artsakh cultural heritage by Azerbaijan and by Armenia, she found a remarkable contrast, first of all, in how Azerbaijan dehumanized, just as Peter and Anna and Gurgen were talking, dehumanizes the Armenians. The argument, the lies that it doesn't belong to them, that it is their own cultural heritage because of some Albanian genetics, which the Albanians were there historically with the Armenians as well. Mostly they had integrated with Armenians, but some did also integrate with, the Seljuk Turks that came over in the 11th century. But those arguments and the dehumanization of Armenians was quite remarkable in the kind of the forcefulness in which they delivered this. They also laid claim to Armenia proper. So it's very clear that what my panelists, what Peter and Anna and Gurgen are saying is true, that they want to complete the annihilation of Armenia and complete the annihilation of the Armenians and to take everything. So that was something that was really interesting that came up from Olivia's work. But then there are civil society groups that she's also studied within Turkish society who are trying to preserve, using social media, using, these apps and using these memory walks to keep Armenian heritage alive within the present in the future. So I think the last thing that I want to just mention, my esteemed colleagues have talked about, the completion of genocide. And the way I've sort of articulated it is not just denial, but erasure. It's erasing people. It's erasing their existence. And so denial is part of erasure, but I think that it's important to really articulate it in the precise terms that we can, that it's not just about denial, it's about erasing the history, erasing the traces of the people, erasing the evidence that people ever lived there to the degree that it is possible. Pretty hard because of the DNA, but nonetheless, that's why the destruction of the monuments are happening in the graveyards and the claims that these are modern rather than ancient, when Armenians were in Artsakh for 5,000 years. Hans Lucas Kieser, who is an extraordinary historian, has talked about the end of democracy. And he argues that it began with the Treaty of Lausanne, which replaced the Treaty of Sèvres, because that was when the world appeased Turkey. And I just would like to make sure that people think about what the implications are of this kind of appeasement that is ongoing. And then the last thing I just want to talk about is something that I think Yael knows intimately, and that is this idea of intergenerational trauma, this idea of the intergenerational grief that gets passed on both epigenetically, but also, through our surrounds and our psychology, and how the children carry that burden of the traumas that our parents and our grandparents have gone through, and how it gets expressed in ways where it's like there is a piece of us missing. Like there's this gargantuan void that is so hard to fill, arising from the experiences of our grandparents and our parents and beyond. I think it's time to heal the Armenian nation, and that will take some serious, I'm not sure of what the word is at 5 a.m, but it's not just about the Armenians, of course, but because so many people are suffering from this kind of intergenerational trauma. But to ignore the Armenians the way some of the international community are doing is going to have a cost, not just of that rich heritage and the richness that the Armenians have given to the rest of the world, but the incompletions, the suffering, and what that suffering does to the human potential and to the global potential of the world. So, so I think I'd like to leave there that our scattered and battered nation can have some healing with the support of the international community, and we're ready for that. We're ready to heal, and we're asking of our international brethren to just be supportive, to let us heal. And Yael, you're a big part of that, so thank you.
Yeah, that's what this center is about. And to help each other heal. So So thank you so much, Maria. It's hard not to cry in these kind of discussions, isn't it? But because you mentioned it, I would like all of you to know that this book, the International Handbook of Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma, that I published in 1998, includes it was the first one that included the Armenians, actually, among all others. At the time, we have 30 populations in this book. It's on our library. Our library is an unbelievable resource for everything related to multi-generational legacies of trauma in every discipline, be it science, be it history, be it law and victimology, be it poetry, be it media, plays, films. So please, everything related, please make sure to send us so it's included. Actually, there was on the chat a mention about an article, Shake Topalian. You're very kind to thank me, but you also told us here that you published your own paper on intergenerational transmission of trauma, bearing witness to, quote, my experience of genocide. Please make sure to send it to us so we put it in the library. It's also not only that, that Armenians should read it, but informing different communities of each other's pain.
Yael, could I just respond to something you've said, which is like
sure.
part of the healing. I think the arts are really important, but I think healing can be incomplete until there is official acknowledgement and until there is official reparation. And reparation can take different forms. And Gurgen would know a lot about this. And so it would be great to have him comment. You know, one of the things that I have been doing is studying the redress movement. And my third book, which was called
what movement?
redressing
Yes, of course.
survivors of genocide and trauma. And what can that look like? What has it looked like? Where can it happen? And I think that it's so important to open up the channels of redressing the survivors of these multi-generational, trauma survivors that includes, the Armenians, but also includes so many others that are suffering right now. And I think that does have to take a legal turn. And there has been some movement, but not enough, around the concept of universal jurisdiction, which is what one of the things I studied in Lawyers Beyond Borders, which is my third book. But universal jurisdiction, the idea, and Gurgen, I want you to comment on this if you wouldn't mind. The idea is that some crimes are so heinous and so threatening to the international community, genocide and torture and massacres and disappearance, that the perpetrators should be held to account everywhere, that they should be prosecuted everywhere. That's the universal jurisdiction, right? And that survivors are entitled, and this is in the treaties are already there, the Torture Convention, for example. Survivors are entitled to a remedy. They are entitled. It's just that we have not put the mechanisms in place to give them these, there's so many people that are so broken. The Armenians have been extraordinarily resilient, but, it's sort of like trying to run a marathon with a broken leg. How much more can we give to the world if we are whole and have our integrity back, our bodily integrity, our psychological integrity? So I would just like to stop on that and see if Gurgen would be willing to respond to that.
Unmute yourself, Peter.
Me? Yeah. Yeah, indeed. Thank you, Maria, for mentioning the universal jurisdiction. Indeed, again, it's some kind of a principle that was also developed in Nuremberg after the Nuremberg, because it's also a Nuremberg principle, which says as soon as the person commits international crime, such as war crime, crimes against humanity, and genocide, he has to be
And crime of
responsible.
aggression.
And crime of aggression, indeed. He has to be, or she has to be, then held responsible for that. In 19th, there was a development of this principle of universal jurisdiction, that atrocities that were committed in former Yugoslavia and Rwanda. Several states has taken the initiative to punish those perpetrators who were actively involved in the massacres in those countries, and independent to their link to that particular state, there started proceedings against those perpetrators. In 2020, also actually the Germany in 2015-16 started a huge let's say campaign on those former perpetrators coming from Syria and Iraq. And there are already several judgments here in Germany against those former ISIS members who committed genocide against Yazidis, other atrocities in Syria and Iraq. And based on that, in 2020, the German Armenian Lawyers Association has also put a complaint here in Germany before the federal German prosecutor in order to investigate the crimes committed by the Azerbaijanis in Nagorno-Karabakh, based on all evidence that we have collected through social media channels, and later with cooperation different victims representatives in Armenia. We provided more evidence and also identified those perpetrators. Indeed, the idea of universal jurisdiction is very important, and I believe that the states should do their responsibility of bringing international criminals before the trial. As also we remember through the Nuremberg legacy, it cannot be peace without justice, and we need justice. We didn't have that after the First World War. Now we have the possibility, as you know, there are proceedings ongoing before International Court of Justice, and it's important that these proceedings are at least ongoing. Armenia became also a member to International Criminal Court, and recently there was a communication to the International Criminal Court by the victims organization based in US. So I hope that this I believe that international law can bring some justice to Armenian people. And Maria, as you mentioned, that we need this kind of healing, and this healing is somehow connected also to the justice. And I believe that international community should really put attention on these instruments at international law and make them happen. I believe that the proceedings that are before International Court of Justice, within the framework of the on elimination of every form of racial discrimination under this convention, I believe that this is so important, at least to give a foundation of those wrongdoings that Azerbaijan is doing against the Armenians. I think these 2 weeks, they were already pleadings before the court. And if you see the argumentations that are being brought by the Azerbaijanis in order to show the justification for their acts, it's sometimes, as a legal scholar, sometimes for me, it's a little bit not serious to hear this kind of argumentation before the court while witnessing International Military Tribunal, while witnessing the genocide in Rwanda, especially when I wanted also to mention after Julio Streicher that the Hutus named the Tutsis as cockroaches and to kill them. And this same terminology we have also in Azerbaijan, calling Armenians as dogs, as worse than the coronavirus, and instigating these words. So this is, and of course, if this comes from the from the political elite. It has also implications on the civil society, on the soldiers in the battlefield. So I think these all instruments of international law, including the universal jurisdiction, including the proceedings before the international courts, I think this is so important in order to achieve at least some sort of healing and reparation, what also Maria correctly was mentioning.
May I show off a little? I'm giving myself permission. And Maria, we are going to do a lot of work together, just in case you haven't figured it out. As Gurgen knows, I'm actually the only human being alive who participated in creating all international law instruments on behalf of victims' rights, including the provisions for victims in the International Criminal Court. Actually, we have a series of webinars called Reparative Justice, Reparative Justice 1, 2, 3, 4. Please all listen to them. Rabbi and Shai, put the links to in the chat, please.
Yeah, I have some.
Just a second. One of the webinars indeed put forth my concept of reparative justice. So it's laid out very clearly. I also have an article on that, which we can send anybody who wants it. Please email us. And not only, there's a whole body of research, including in this book, that shows that indeed justice is a necessary element of healing. So it's not like justice is just about, a list of laws to figure out which click to what. No, let me be careful. Justice has the potential, when it's done reparatively, it has the potential to heal. When you only use the victim's testimony or the victim as testimony and then throw them out, or when you just re-traumatize the victim, it's not reparative. Injustice becomes a re-traumatization. But when it is done correctly, with dignity and respect and compassion to the victim, throughout the process, not just getting the guy guilty or not only at the end, or even after that, only then to get to reparation. No, the whole process can be reparative. And as a matter of fact, even in the International Criminal Court, in the Trust Fund for Victims, which is my baby, there are two visions. One is for assistance, and one is for reparation proper. And it's for assistance exactly until as long as, when you are in terrible need. So we, Gurgen enjoys that. We started this conversation in the rehearsal. We can go on and on about that, but this has been a totally parallel mission of mine, not only to study multi-generational. And the best news is that in the last judgment in the International Criminal Court, the Ongwen case, that's in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Am I correct, Gurgen? That is DRC.
Uganda.
Uganda, thank you. Yes, that's why I knew I was wrong. In the ongoing case, indeed, direct, and there's a whole lot. We can have a whole webinar just on direct versus indirect victims, okay? But the amazing news is that the child born of rape is also a direct victim, not only the mother who was raped and became pregnant. Okay, so even the multi-generational issues are already recognized in the court. We have to work a lot more to educate the court with exactly what this webinar is doing, right? Explain how intergenerational effects happen, right? How adult experts can speak to their own effects, which is what we're doing. But it's in the right direction. And by the way, it's not called restorative justice, Ted. It is reparative justice. Restorative justice comes from criminology, and it's about the rights of the offenders. Reparative justice comes from victimology, and it's about the rights of victims. Okay, so one thing is to do everything we can to reintegrate the offender into the community after the offender has paid its due to humanity, right? But another thing is to hold the victim in the center of our attention, right? And to think of justice as for the victim, not only for society. Because as you see, just from listening to the five of us right here, we feel justice. We don't, it's not just something on a page. You know, and people with big hats and big, you know, things, exercise. People feel it, and people feel the lack of it. And the lack of it literally keeps people stuck in the trauma from generation to generation. Gorgen, you had your hand up, please.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. And maybe also giving a chance to thank you also for your all efforts also during the 90s to develop this institution at International Criminal Court, that the victims receive the chance to speak out and give their own views and position during the proceedings, because the victims' involvement in the criminal proceedings is very important. And I believe that as soon as we have already these victims' organizations communication to the prosecutor, that the prosecutor of the ICC will take that seriously, this communication, and will start its preliminary examination at the first stage at least. And this small step towards that direction would give a huge hope for the Armenians to believe to have another very small part of hope. So I hope that the prosecutor will go that step and will initiate the proceedings. I said, this is, for me, it is very important that it is taken seriously.
Absolutely agree, Peter.
Yes, I love the fact that Gurgen has touched so many important parts, and specifically something that I believe, which is justice. That's the only way we can move on from all of this. And denial is the lack of justice. When the justice is not acting out or is not playing part in reality, the denial becomes stronger, and basically the power of the denial causes the trauma to continue and to be reborn in the next generation. And there are the specific things that Gurgen mentioned that I wanted to add on, where it comes down to specifically in the case of, let's say, the Armenians and the Azerbaijanis presently, is that when the Azerbaijanis are creating stamps, and in the stamp they're showing an extermination process of Armenians being shown as cockroaches or insects being exterminated, and that stamp is becoming a national stamp that's being used in the country. This is where we know for a fact that they're on the wrong road, and never peace can even be offered, because you cannot have peace between two countries when one country wants to exterminate the other country, or their mind frame is set in that pretense. And then I also want to add, that's very important, and I've said this from day one when the war happened in 2020. After the war, I mean, we as a community, the diasporan Armenians that have been scattered all over the world, and generations of us have been born outside of our homelands, have still kept the Armenian identity alive by protecting our history, by protecting our identity, by protecting our literature, by speaking the language generation from generation. You know, born in Canada, my father would be so upset at me in the house, and my mom, if I didn't speak Armenian growing up. I mean, this was part of my upbringing, and I know I'm not the only one. Armenians in general growing up had to be strict on their kids, because you lose the language, you lose your history, all of a sudden, you just don't have an identity to connect to. I, luckily enough, being brought up in a household that was very Armenian, my dad producing Armenian music when I was a child, listening to music, growing up in that environment, that gave me the tools to realize that what is my identity and be proud of my identity. And at the same time, when I saw what was happening at the war, feeling defenseless, feeling like this is happening again in our generation. And then once the war was going on and we saw all the atrocities being committed, things that are war crimes, their typical definition of war crimes being committed by the Aliyev regime, and then afterwards expecting justice to happen immediately, at least when the war ended, you expect something to happen. At least you say, okay, all of these people died, now let's look for find justice in this. And then Aliyev being able to just scot-free get out of prison jail from the international community, the lack of justice, what that did was a trigger that gave Putin the open card to go and hit Ukraine, because he understood, because the war, first of all, that war in Armenia and Azerbaijan that happened in Putin's backyard. Okay, this is territory of Putin, which is an oligarch. Everybody is now very well aware that he is a very powerful person in the world. He's like a mob boss that runs a country and a military. And all the ex-Soviet countries that became independent followed that footsteps. And Armenia, not being any different, we had a struggle to fight for democracy, and still fighting for democracy in the country. But most of the other countries are run by oligarchs, Aliyev being one typical one, authoritarian, running a country that basically has his hand on it. His wife's the vice president. His family are the richest people in Azerbaijan, owning properties all over. And everything's about greed and power. So when Aliyev's not held accountable, when Putin gives him the green light to let go with his arsenal, when Aliyev is being supported by Turkey directly on the initiatives that, Erdogan said several years back, Armenians, stop asking for the genocide recognition. And if you continue asking for the recognition, I'm going to show you what our old ancestors tried to succeed. I'm going to succeed. And that's what he's been planning to do, not through Turkey, but through Aliyev and Azerbaijan. So when he's giving military to Azerbaijan to try to, destroy, in the pretense of Artsakh being part of Azerbaijan, which was total bullshit, okay? Total bullshit, because the people in Artsakh have lived there for over 1,000 years. They have an old community there. They've always been Armenian. And because Stalin decided to break off the Armenian population, divide and conquer, and to give Azerbaijan one part of it, and Nakhichevan, which is another Armenian land that gave to other part of Azerbaijan, just because that's what he did. He divided people so that he can control them, doesn't give them the right and doesn't give them the carte blanche saying that is an Azerbaijani land. No, it's the people that make the land. The people that live on those lands are the people that are indigenous to those lands. When he got away with what he got away with, doing phosphorus, using phosphorus weapons, using weapons against civilians, hitting targets like churches and hospitals and schools, and not being tried for war crimes, Putin did the same thing. And sadly now, it's a trend that continues. When justice is not done to these perpetrators, it opens the doors for more perpetrators. They know they can get away with it. And if they can get away with it, then it's complete chaos. We are walking into wars now.
Mhm.
Instead of in this century where we're civilized and we can communicate with just a camera and a computer and a phone with each other all over the world, and we can talk to each other, it's given us division and it's put walls in front of us. And now, social media has become, instead of a forum for education, it's become a forum of miseducation and propaganda. This is what we're trying to live through now. And I think this is the issues that I believe that the war in Ukraine would have never happened if Aliyev was found guilty for all the war crimes that he had perpetrated against the Armenians. I feel like there's so much things that are happening now that's all connected to the Armenians and that war in Artsakh in 2020. It's about justice. If we can't have justice, we live in America. If somebody kills somebody here outside of my house, and if he's not put into jail because of his actions, then somebody else will kill another person, and somebody else will, and this is a chain reaction. It doesn't end. If there's justice, if the perpetrator is paying the price for whatever he's committed, then another perpetrator will think twice before he perpetrates anything against anybody, because he knows that there's consequences. I think the lack of consequences is now what we're living in, and it's a very dangerous time when there's lack of consequences for people's actions. And that's where Gurgen's expertise, when it comes down to legal is how we can control this. The legislative world, the world where judicial world, that we've created laws for a reason so that people don't go kill people, and there's rules that you got to follow. But if we can't protect them, and if we can't use those rules and integrate them in society, then they're useless. So the idea is that we have to be able to not stop trying to believe in justice. We have to continue in believing in justice, that it will happen, and fight for it. I mean, there's an incredible organization, which is the Center for Truth and Justice, that have been working on documenting all the people that left Artsakh when the massive forced movement of the Artsakh people came into play. It was because it was a 9 month of a blockade and starvation, mental and moral, spiritual torture. People were being attacked on a regular basis. This was ongoing, and for an island, which Artsakh became an island, for them to not have water to drink, not have electricity in the winter, and then being bombarded by all of this for 9 months, and then eventually, and under the pretense of it being like an eco-protest, because that's how it all started, another bullshit propaganda was set forth. So once that ended, and then the last days of an actual military attack, and then all of a sudden, okay, we're gonna stop and let you guys leave if you want to. And obviously everybody left. The Armenians don't trust Azerbaijanis. They don't trust them. Why? Because of experience and history. This is not coming out of propaganda. This is coming out of real life experiences. Our series of the Desire to Live films, all the ones that we filmed all over, we have 40 episodes. Everybody that we interviewed, you know what, we were surprised, and I was mostly surprised, that the people living through all of this still had hope. They believed that they can live in peace with Azeris next door and Turks next door. All they wanted was to live on their lands. They didn't want war. They didn't want to go fight, and they didn't want revenge. They wanted to live in peace. They wanted their kids to live in peace. This was the ongoing message. And sadly, Armenians have gone in that direction, but their neighbors have not. And this is where we are now in this context, where we need justice. We need the legal system to protect us. We're not barbarians. We don't want to be barbarians. Armenians don't want to go backwards in time. We want to go ahead in time and only find peaceful solutions to things. But we need the help. We need the help of the international community.
Mhm. And go ahead, Maria, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in on two things Peter said, because it's super important. One is that, yes, we need the legal reparative justice. We need that. It's super important to act on that. The legal justice movements need people to support it because the law follows cultural, societal demands. And so all of the other things that Yael was talking about in terms of art and in terms of literature and in terms of poetry and in terms of all of that is so important to move the international community to support the legal ends. Law is just a cultural thing ultimately, right? The rule of law is something that we agree is important. And when people stop upholding that as a society, this idea, then we lose it. And we can't lose it. We have to show that the rule of law and the legal solutions that Peter is talking about, so important. So we stop the violence. Legal solutions, stop the violence. This is the civil way to handle disputes. That's what we want to move towards permanently. So that was the first thing. The other thing is I just wanted to concur about CFTJ, the Center for Truth and Justice. What an extraordinary organization. And the way it was formed, the way it came together organically by mostly young female lawyers who wanted to do something for the people of Artsakh and have gone in and have been training law students in Artsakh, in Armenia, and documenting all of this, and then working with lawyers all over the world to then bring some kind of reparative justice to those who have suffered torture and massacres.
Thank you. I would like to, I'm not quick with putting things on the chat, but I did do an international study on what I call necessary elements of healing after trauma, after massive trauma. And I will share that one way or the other with everybody who is on the panel and has attended. And indeed, there is no one thing that we must have to heal. It is always multi-dimensional, always in need of multidisciplinary examination, and also has to be viewed from the individual point of view, the societal point of view, the national point of view, and the international society community point of view. Okay, so there's several tasks, and actually that study was done to create the resolution about remedy, exactly what, Maria, you were talking about. But even I have a question to all of you, particularly Anna, actually. Because part of the reparative justice series we are doing actually for the Ukraine justice system. We are participating in actually helping the Ukraine justice system become reparative and focus on victims. But of course, Anna in particular, by each one of you, it has to also do with training the professional to examine him or herself, to see the effect of trauma on him or herself, so that it doesn't blind you or deafen you or us from listening to victims. The reason I'm picking on you, Anna, in particular, is that you're doing this day in and day out. It's not only your mission, it's your profession. It's like a full-time job. And of course, Gorgon also. So I wanted to ask if you would briefly reflect on how doing this work affects you.
No.
I mean, we all listen to you, so we have some idea. But
Yeah.
if you could say a few words, please.
Thank you, Doctor. That's actually a very good question because I've been personally struggling with this. Like I told you earlier when we had spoken, I come from business news and local news and 10 years of entertainment news, right? It was fun stuff and it was exciting. It was Hollywood. But the process in which you gather the news is identical. It's the same. So when I started the Armenian report, never in a million years did I think that 2 years into it, there would be this huge war and loss and trauma, and I would be re-experiencing what my great grandfathers and mothers experienced, right? What my ancestors. So initially, the trauma in 2020 was massive. There was nothing to prepare me for it. I saw therapists, non-Armenian therapists. I couldn't because subconsciously I was already so angry. I knew that they couldn't understand what I was going through. And the Armenian therapist I was seeing had the trauma themselves. So it was more of a friendly conversation than anything else. So I was taught certain tools of when I'm experiencing this anger and frustration, because you're in it every day and you're forced to see these visuals and describe it, because a lot of times you can't put these images right and share it on your platforms, so you have to describe what you just saw with words. And so there's a lot of trauma there that I had to learn certain tools. Like one of the things that personally works for me is when you're experiencing like the walls are just coming crashing down on you, you just have to stop what you're doing and name everything on each wall. And then somehow that technique has calmed me down. And it's a technique that a therapist has taught me, and she was Armenian, and this is something that has helped her. And so she tried different things with me when I was really bad. And that has worked. So I tried to do that technique, but now I feel like I'm in this bubble where it's literally waking up to hell every morning. And I just accepted that I'm going to wake up to hell every morning. And this is in this lifetime, in this body as an Armenian, this is what I have to deal with, because I don't see things getting better or changing in my lifetime, because there's so much trauma and so much has happened that I have told myself, like, this isn't something that you're just gonna by next year, by like set a goal, like in the next 10 years, things, it's not. This is a lot deeper. This is a lot worse than what we went through. Like as the years go by, I'm like, that was bad. It just like, it keeps getting bad because you're reflecting more and more. So being in it day in and day out, you have to learn to take yourself out of it, see it as a job, and then reflect on it later. Because if I'm in the moment, and that moment, writing as an Armenian, I won't be able to crank out 10, 12 stories in a day. I'll only be able to do one. So I can't. So I have to just block it all off, to write it. And then by evening, when my husband and I are like unwinding, I'm a mess, because he's like, oh, do you want to watch The Crown, or do you want to watch? And I'm like, I can't think. I need friends, like put me something where I don't have to think, because I'm processing it by the end of the night, because I've been in this robotic mode, and that's how I've learned to deal with it. But I know that's not a healthy way, but I have to wake up every morning and I have to work every morning. So I'm just like, accept that this is your life. And we have this thing where my husband and I ask him, like, in your next lifetime, what would you want to come back as? And he always says he wants to come back as a Japanese man. And I want to come back as like a Southern white woman. It's just something we always talk about, but why do we ask these questions? Because it's so hard to be an Armenian. There's so much pain that I just use humor to live with it, because I have to live with it.
Humor is very important. And somebody in the chat gave you another grounding technique.
Oh, I'll read Rosanna's comment. Thank you.
But one of my dreams, I don't know how long God will keep me here, is to do reparative justice, reparative journalism, reparative, policing, reparative, in all the professions, to teach people not to read and to be objective, because after all, if you're totally overwhelmed, being objective is one of the first victims. So
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
This chat is quite amazing, and the questions also. I wonder how to efficiently deal with, now.
Somebody wants to come back as an Armenian. They don't know what they're in for. I just read it on the chat. They want to come back.
That is a funny one.
A lot of weight that you carry from birth, and as you grow older, you go into these cycles of what has happened to you and your ancestors, and then you find out that your family tree is cut off, and you don't even know your great grandfather's name. So there's a lot of things of being an Armenian that comes with it just at birth. I mean, obviously, I'm very proud Armenian, and I wouldn't change it for anything, because of the fact that Armenians have such an incredible culture, and they go way back. We actually, my partner, Roger Kupelian, which is an incredible filmmaker, we worked on another project just recently called Warrior Saints, and we cover 700 years of history in the Caucasus that basically cover the Jewish, the reign, the Roman reign, the Armenians involved, the Persians, all of the history that really actually happened, not the ones that
we need to have a webinar on that, Peter.
we will.
Several other working groups of the center are in that film and will be interested in that.
Yes, absolutely. And the goal is now that, because I realized more than ever that history needs to be protected. It's so easy to rewrite it. So my forces, or at least my resources and my expertise, lies in making documentaries. I figured this is what I do best. And in this case, we did a series of it, just talking about history, but showing it in a new form so that the youth can be attracted to it, making it more exciting, telling the story of history. But it's unbelievable the wealth of history Armenians have been involved in, and how far back it goes, and the fact that we're all connected. We all come in certain areas of the world, but we have the same goals. We want the same things at the end. We want to have family, we want to have community, we want to be living in a civilized world. We want to have a say, but at the same time, we want to have order and people telling us what's right and what's wrong. And we're ready to follow, because as we've proven, since the genocide happened, Armenians integrated into societies all over the world. It didn't matter if it was a country in Middle East like Syria, which was Muslim, they still accepted Armenians. And I'm happy to say there's communities everywhere that stayed Armenian, maintained their identity because of who they are and their wealth. And with that's some kind of effort that is also within ourselves, that we thrive to maintain and protect.
And it makes sense therapeutically, because trauma is a rupture. And when you go back and recreate the continuity, you're attempting to heal that rupture. You see? So what you're doing is absolutely an element of healing. There's no question about that. And it's the same with you, Anna. You're recording. You're making sure that there's a continuity of knowledge, of truth. And so I don't know how to be fair with this. Is such an active audience. It's unbelievable. Let's How about Robbie, help here? Okay, let me start from the end, backwards. Peter, people ask that you bring back to our website the desire to live.
Oh, should I post it on the chat, the desire to live? Is that?
I don't know. Edna Antonian is saying, I do not find the desire to live on YouTube any longer. How can we see these episodes again? Actually, you can see it on our website, on the center.
I also posted it in the chat. I'll post it again.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I
Fantastic.
did post the link to the website. We have 40 episodes on YouTube that's available to watch for free. And basically, you know, we filmed in a period of time where we filmed, and I don't know how sometimes things happen, but just me meeting Mariam, which is a native of Artsakh at the
Right.
time, and getting to know, and that's how we met Yal. And Yal, you were so open to having us on your show a few years back, and I didn't know you then back then, but since then I've got to know your work, and I'm amazed by how you do it. You know, that's something that obviously is the $1 million question. I've seen your webinars on, and you deal with this on different cultures in different parts of the world, but your whole goal is the same, is to find some kind of path to peace, some kind of path to being able to deal with the traumas of the past. And I mean, this is a burden and a weight on its own to carry, and you managed to do this for years now. I mean, my heart goes to you because I'm specifically dealing with the Armenian one, and I'm focused within the Armenian one, but obviously I don't neglect all other pain and suffering all around the world that I see happening. And I relate, and as Armenians, I've realized too, we relate to every pain that people are suffering around the world. Why this is the reason why we go to the rescue of the person that's in pain, and whoever they are, we try to fight for their rights as well. This is common within the Armenian community, and we do that all the time. I've noticed that, and I've noticed the Jewish community doing the same, because whoever suffers a genocide, a Holocaust, a massacre, death to their lives and communities, go through a transition as a human being. They become evolved, and they don't want to see that suffering ever again. And you know, you go through a war, you don't ever want to see a war anymore. So you do everything possible, you know, to avoid war. Unfortunately, the people that bring war are people of power that are using it to control masses and to be greedy. You know, the simple answer to why Azerbaijan attacks Armenia or wants to annihilate Armenians, Artsakh specifically, is because there's mines there. They want to take and violate the mines and take the riches from those lands and then sell them for chips and, you know, make money from it and keep their people hating Armenians. Because if their people are not looking outwards as the enemy, then they're going to look inwards as the enemy, as Aliyev being the enemy, because he's the one stealing. Aliyev is the biggest threat to Azerbaijan. This is somebody seeing it from an outside perspective. He's the biggest threat to their people because he's the one that's keeping them that way. He's the one that's imprisoning people that speak against them. He's the one that's, you know, making their civilization go backwards in time. And these are rulers in the past that have done this to their people. Like, obviously, we know Hitler was the biggest enemy of Germany as well, not only the Jews, but he was the biggest enemy of the German people because he turned them into a machine that he controlled. And this is where civilization fails, or human beings fail at becoming more evolved and being more peaceful, you know, as a process. So it's
free.
Correct.
That's the thing about dictators, is that their people are not free.
And Peter, you put your finger on something else that's very important, which is two important, really very important ones. You know, you don't know, but I'll share with you. I created the only measure to assess multi-generational legacies of trauma. I validated it on children of Holocaust survivors, but it's been translated culturally as well, Maria, not just the words. It's very good work in other languages and other cultures. And Armenian is not yet. So I'm reaching out to the Armenian community. Those of you who are interested in studying, it might be in the social sciences or psychologists, sociologists, or just open-minded people. It's available, and I work with you, so you're not doing it all alone. And one of the things we are studying there, Peter, one of the concepts is I believe that I found that there are different ways people adapt to massive trauma. Okay, so very quickly, not to pretend even that you would know after I say it. For example, I identified 4 ways of adapting to trauma. One is to adapt a style of victim, right? Forever be a victim. Another is to always be a fighter. Okay. Another is to live a numb life. It's almost frozen in place, neither happy nor unhappy, just to stay. And the third is, in quotation mark, those who made it, who seemed externally like everything is fantastic, but internally actually live rather an intimate life with others. It's a way of being in the world. I've written about it. Those who are interested, it's all in our library, or you can reach out to me. So the questionnaire studies that. That's the adaptational style of the parents. The children show what I call reparative adaptational impacts. What does it mean? Every child, normal child, has the unconscious mostly, but some are conscious, need to repair the world for themselves and for their parents. First for their parents. And you put your finger on that, Peter, right? That everybody is ready to repair. There's a wish to repair. And among different survivor groups, you have camaraderie of that kind of need to reach out, right? You see pain, you want to help. And that's part of what makes the center's work livable for me. Not just livable, makes me happy sometimes. To see people caring about other people, for themselves and for others. And after all, we want a just world. We don't want a just world just for us, because then again, it's dividing, right? It creates the wrong context for the future. So that's half an answer to your question, but also a little bit teaching from the other side and promotion. So, but that would be fantastic, Maria, if we can maybe start real work on that, because that could help the Maori people as well as the Armenian people, etc., etc. So, and actually, Jacqueline Murakatete, Jacqueline, are you still here? I don't know, but she did directly. She's a survivor of the Rwandan genocide. She was a child, and she said, you know, we live in the same world. That kind of camaraderie that's centered too in the center, not just the suffering, but right, the camaraderie that gives meaning to being human beings, because we mirror that part of ourselves too, the human part, not just the horribleness.
I think that is probably one of the most important ways of dealing with what we're dealing with right now. And this is what gives us the strength to continue, or we would all be on anti-depression pills, right?
Yeah.
The life itself is not always fun and happy, even though we try to make our surroundings, the immediate surroundings, as pleasant as possible. But there is a reality that we have to still absorb when it comes to the big picture, and as within the Armenian community and worldwide. You know, we're always fighting this invisible force. Even though we identify it ourselves, it's still invisible because there's players that are pulling strings for the argument of why we're still existing and how we still manage to stay alive here. And the communities helped, the families helped, staying together helped, being positive, bringing music together, eating together, being married and having kids again together.
Actually, in this book, the Armenian study is one of the most important one. And it didn't only look at the trauma, at the suffering, it also looked at those structures that are resilient. And they did mention the community, the church, the family, right? And adhering again, maintaining continuity, right? Adhering to certain values that keep the identity going despite no matter what the world hands you.
That is the key. I think that's what's kept Armenians together, and we've had a strong family. That's one thing that the family units of Armenians have always managed to be strong, and maybe because of extinction, or at least facing extinction, brought us to a level where we knew how difficult it is to maintain it and keep it strong. These are elements that I believe when people believe that are important in their lives, now that all of a sudden now they start protecting it more, and now they start following that path, and then war becomes obsolete if you go in that path. It doesn't exist anymore. You know, we can solve things by talking, communicating, discussing, negotiating. There's many ways, there's many tools that we have now. And even now presently, as a simple example, Armenians in Jerusalem, they have a quarter in the old quarter, and they've been there forever. They're under attack. Why are they under attack? You know, like, this is all these questions we ask all the time. Why is it this constant, you know, always fighting for trying to maintain what we have? It's not, Armenians are not trying to expand. Obviously, everybody wants to grow and, you know, have a bigger house or what. But when you have something and you've held it and protected it for so long, and then now there's a threat, an ongoing threat of somebody taking it away, and you start asking the question, why is this always ongoing? Why are we always fighting this invisible force that's always trying to threaten our pure existence? You know, and the history for me is important. Protecting the history is very important. I think obviously we learn from this history. We have somebody on our chat, Michael, that I met recently, and he's working on a film on Solomon Teredian's life. I mean, basically, he was the man that killed Talat Pasha, and he once said, you know, I've killed a man, but I'm not a murderer. And that statement alone made sense to all Armenians. Why? Because that man, Talat Pasha, was in charge of the extermination of the Armenians and killed over millions of Armenians. And because of that, you know, we had to deal with everything that happened afterwards. The fact that he was found guilty and was sentenced to death, and then was able to run away and hide in Germany and countries that where he was able to find refuge, and he was killed. And that for us was justice. And you know, it's interesting how a killing of a person could be justice for Armenians, but at least it gave us a little bit of a sanity of making sure that all our grandparents or everybody that were killed, one of the perpetrators paid the price for it. And that justice needs to be served. You know, if you don't serve that justice properly, it's going to haunt you forever, and it's going to continue growing like a disease inside of you. And you know, as a young Armenian growing up, I had to deal with a bit of that disease in me, because automatically it builds hate and animosity and resentment towards others that you don't even know, that you've never even met in your life. And to filter that out so that you can find a common ground, so you can have conversations and discussions about it. It takes a bit of energy and the right people around you and education. But we're there. I don't think any real Armenian thinks violence is the answer to be Armenian. They've known that at this point, peace is the way to go. And we're hoping that people that we're fighting, or at least people that think we're a threat, they see us as people that they can talk to and they can relate to, because obviously I've had Turkish friends in my life growing up, and I've never had a problem with them, and they've never had a problem with me. We don't have problems between people. We have problems between policies and denials of things that need to be said. These are the problems we have. We don't have, as an Armenian, I don't have a problem with the Turkish population. Just like Maria said, a Turk saved her grandfather from, being killed, thus her being alive now. My grandfather was also saved by a Kurd family. They kept him for 2 years before he became 10 years old, and then he took the journey to Lebanon. There are people, obviously, that are there. People are not the people are not the perpetrators. It's these policies and this propaganda and people of power that use it, for the masses. And this is what we have to remedy. This is what we're fighting against and trying to change in our lives, and we will change it. Or at least we will fight till change comes. I think this is the key, or we can't give up that fight. If we do, then we will all lose.
Sorry, I'm smiling, but I just realized, looking at the participants list, that Rupin Boyadjian is here. Rupin and I were together in Rwanda, in Kigali, where we held in 2001 an international meeting of all genocide survivors groups. So Rupin is a grandchild of survivors, and he was one of the 3 Armenians who came. Rupin, you want to say hi? Robbie, would you let Rupin speak, please? It's too wonderful to miss. Sorry, you see, Peter, I said that getting together, camaraderie, brings me happiness. You're just seeing it. Rupin, hello? Are you there? Rabbi, do you have the connection?
Yes, he is connected, but no audio is coming through on his end.
Oh, that's too bad. Oh, okay. Okay, we missed it, but he's on the list. So, but we should have another such meeting soon. We had one in 2001 at the invitation of the survivors of Rwanda. I had the honor of being the international chair. I think maybe we should plan on one together to bring again the groups. Of course, is always the only obstacle is funding. So start thinking, bright people, how we can get the funding. And I can assure you that was the most important meeting I ever attended. There is nothing like having survivors with survivors. So let's think about it. Gorgan, I see your mind is already running. It's perfect. Because that's really, that was one of the most healing, even though everyone had the worst stories on earth. We had everybody. We had people from Bosnia, from Rwanda. We had indigenous people from North America, from Australia, from New Zealand. We had Cambodians. We had literally from everywhere. And that's also a way to make the world a better place. I have to apologize profusely to the audience. This has been an unbelievable audience. I think one person left and we are way over time. And you were unbelievable in terms of comments on the chat and questions. I hope some of them were answered. I will share all the questions with the panelists. So if they're directed directly to you, please take your time to email back, okay? But I wouldn't want to end this without asking each one of you for last word, even though there's so many gems in what you shared. I can't imagine what will be the last gem. And of course, it's not the last because we will meet again. I mean, Gurgen and I already have a date in Nuremberg in October. I will be there. And Maria, well, we will continue talking, and so is Anna and Peter and I talk all the time. I run after him, poor guy, catching him, running around in his business, talking to this, doing that. So last word, let's do it in what order? Who cares, sort of? Maria, why don't you start?
I just want to say thank you for all that you do, Yael, and for hosting this as well, and for your commitment. And I also want to thank Peter and Anna and Gurgen. You know, you guys, I am just so happy of what you are doing to advance the causes of justice and to advance the causes of truth. It's just what we must all do as one big team in the world to try to take care of one another and this planet that we inhabit together. So vital. We just need more people on the team. And the more, the merrier, the more powerful, the richer, you know, bring them all along as much as we can, because I think we can do this. I really do, but it is going to require lots of persuasion and more people on the cause. So one of the key parts of making this all work, this justice, this making the world peaceful and livable and habitable for everybody, it just is going to require more people to not run away from it, to not be so discouraged by the things that we are seeing today, and to turn their energy from the fear and from the anger to envision a world where we are all good, we're all happy and safe and fed and comfortable, and taking care of one another and taking care of this planet that we share.
Amen. Gurgen, my friend, you have to answer.
Yeah, I will be short. First of all, thank you, Yael, also for raising this issue and bringing us all together to speak about Armenian genocide, the genocide that is ongoing. As a conclusion, I would just say the words of Benjamin Ferenc, the last prosecutor of the Nuremberg trials, who unfortunately passed away last year. Do law, not war. So I truly believe that international instruments are at this stage very important, and we need to find and we need to believe that these instruments will also be as a instrument of the healing, or the solution of the healing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anna.
Thank you. Thank you again, Dr. Daniele, for having me, and Peter and everyone. This is very interesting. I actually got to learn a lot from listening to everyone. As far as my last words go, I think that somebody who is doing this work every day, the stories are being told in little increments. In just a matter of couple of months that we launched the ArmeniaReport.com, we already have over 1,000 stories published. And I think that the collective mindset needs to be that we need to work and think long term in order for us to achieve the goals that, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen tomorrow or next year, but the little droplets that we do, right? Like in my case, it's the stories that we do. In a few months, we've already published over 1,000 stories. So these little stories add up, and we will get to the goals that we want, which is stop the Armenophobia, stop with the threats, stop with the hate, and stop with the occupation of our lands, chipping away at our homes, and dispersing Armenians all over the world, continuing with that. The Armenians want to live on their lands, and someone like me who is from the diaspora, I wish I grew up on my own homeland, right? So I don't want the future generations to experience what I experienced. And so, I'm staying on my own yoga mat. I know journalism. I'm doing my part. Gurgen, you stay on your law yoga mat. And so everyone does their thing. And like Maria said, we need more people, and just everyone doing their part. And
absolutely. And when you study our website, you see that we feed news on the website every day from everywhere. So please feel free to just shoot it to us. Okay. And also the organization that all of your organizations can become related links on the website. Okay, so make sure we have them.
Okay.
Not just for recognition, but possibly for planning future webinars or future activities.
Absolutely. I will definitely share the site with you. Thank you.
Yes, and to everyone, everyone who registered will receive automatically the recording of this webinar, so not to worry. Otherwise, in addition, we have all of our webinars on our website. It's close to 50 now, and so please feel free. This is a home to everyone. So. And last but not least, last word, my our dear Peter.
Yeah, thank you very much for organizing and what you do on a day-to-day basis. Like I said before, I don't know how you do it, but please keep on doing it. It's extremely important to everybody. To my Armenians out there, everywhere, anywhere, I want to just tell you one thing. I know it sometimes you feel that you're helpless. I know sometimes you feel that it's happening again and again. The same thing's a cycle, it's a pattern, and you kept falling into it and you feel victimized on a regular basis. But I have one thing to tell you to make sure that you realize this. We've survived, we've persevered as a community, as a whole, even though we're scattered all over the world. But we've also graduated to the next level of human beings. I believe in that. I believe in the fact that we are leaders of this world. We are going to lead this world into peace. Armenians will lead the way because we don't want to see any more atrocities happen to anybody, including our enemies, including the people that are trying to destroy us. We don't want to see that destruction amongst them. We just want them to realize that there is another path for living. And we will reach that goal as long as we continue fighting for it. And that will be my last words. And I will pray to God that he hears me as well.
Yes. And I hate to get to leave. So a big hug to everyone. And we simply continue. each one of you guys can become part of the, you know, of the Armenian working group. And we can just make it bigger and bigger, just as you want, Maria. Not only as you want, but as you rightly say. So God bless you.
Thank you, Yael.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody. Thank you all so much. Much
Thank
love.
you. And thanks for everyone who stayed with us throughout. No, before we leave, wait. I want to, I forget my word. Next we are going to, later in the week, you will receive the flyer for our upcoming May 2 webinar, shedding light on the multi-generational wounding of missing and murdered indigenous women and girls and persons in general. Immediately thereafter, on May 6th, which is the day of commemoration of the Holocaust for the Jewish people, we will have a webinar on remembering and mourning the Shoah after October 7th. And then there was a question about that on the chat. On May 14, we have a webinar of raising children born after the Hutu genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda 30 years ago. And on and on and on. But just please stay in touch, clue in, and keep with us so we become this important community of truth and justice and healing. And thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.